Welcome. This is the lecture for Chapter 38 on asymmetric information. Now, in all of our models so far, we've assumed that both sides of transactions, buyers, sellers, know what the potential transaction is. That's not always true in the real world. I assume you have on occasion bought something online, maybe from Amazon, and boy, it looks great. What a great deal. I'll love this thing. And it arrives, and you open it up and look at it and go, oh, this is garbage. Gosh. That's an information asymmetry. The seller knew that that thing was a piece of garbage. You didn't. Medical services, insurance. Insurance in particular is a case study in information asymmetry, and it causes a lot of public policy problems because insurance markets don't work right in a sense. Used cars, not so much of a problem, but the seminal paper on this topic was written using the example of the used car market. I'll get to that in a minute. So, examples. Doctor knows more about medical services than the buyer of those medical services does. You know, your doctor says, get this test. You get the test. You don't know if it's a good idea or not. Insurance companies. You know how risky you are to insure a lot better than the insurance company does. And the used car example, if you have a used car and you're going to sell it, well, you know, really, if that's a good used car or a bad used car. You know if it's going to last or not because you've experienced it. The buyer or potential buyer, you know, they can tell some things, but they really can't know as well as you do whether that car is good or bad. This is generically called a problem of information asymmetry. There are three topics in this area I'm going to talk about. Adverse selection, moral hazard, and signaling. These first two are particular types of information asymmetry, incomplete information in markets. This third one is a way people try to get around it. Now, the most important paper ever written in information economics is this: The Market for Lemons, Quality Uncertainty and the Market Mechanism, written by George Akerlof in 1970. He won the Nobel Prize in economics in 2001. He is still faculty. He's 80 about today, born in 1940, yeah. He's still on the faculty of Georgetown University in Washington, D.C., and Berkeley in California. This is just a screen grab of the first page. I have uploaded a PDF of the whole paper to Moodle under Chapter 38. Look at it if you'd like. I should point out, in this paper, he used the example of the used car market. I think he might have actually created this language. If you say something's a lemon, especially in reference to cars, it means it's a stinker, it's bad, low quality. In this paper, he looked at used cars that were bad. He called them lemons. Used cars that were actually good quality, he called them peaches. It's interesting that after this paper started to catch hold, eventually states and I think even the federal government passed some laws protecting people from buying cars that turned out to be junk. And they were called lemon laws. I think he created the term. Okay. Here is just really simplified logic of his paper. I pulled these numbers. I think these are the numbers from his paper. You can tell it was written in 1970 because of the prices involved. Buying a used car for a good quality used car for $2,000 and change. Anyway, assume that all cars in the used car market are identical, except they have two and only two levels of quality, good and bad. And we call them the good ones peaches, bad ones lemons. Now, if you own a lemon, you know it's a bad car. You'd be willing to sell it for $1,000. You won't take less than $1,000. For buyers, if they know it's a bad used car, they'd pay no more than $1,200. And here are the prices if it's a peach, if it's a good car. The seller knows it's a good car, won't take less than $2,000. The buyer, who knows it's a good car, won't pay more than $2,400. Well, sellers can always tell whether their car is good or bad because they've driven it. Buyers, let's assume for the moment, they also know whether the car is a peach or a lemon. Pardon me. If both sides know whether a particular car is a peach or a lemon, then there's no information asymmetry, and there are gains from trade. If the car is a lemon, well, they could negotiate to a price in between $1,000 and $1,200, say $1,100. Both would be better off. If it's a peach, they could negotiate to a price somewhere between $2,000 and $2,400. And again, both be better off. Gains from trade, selling lemons, and gains from trade, selling peaches. That's if everybody knows what kind of car it is. But suppose buyers can't tell the difference before they buy it. And after you buy it, it's too late. Well, remember, again, sellers always know if it's a peach or a lemon. If buyers just can't tell, then how much would they pay for a used car? Now, remember, buyers are willing to pay $1,200 for a lemon. They're willing to pay $2,400 for a peach. If they can't tell the difference, then they'll pay no more than the expected value. That is, if they bought cars randomly over an infinite number of times, what's the average value they get? Assume Q is the probability of a car turning out to be a peach, the fraction of cars for sale that are peaches. Well, that would mean 1 minus Q is the fraction that are lemons. So a buyer buying a randomly selected car, because they can't tell which is which, would only be willing to pay $2,400, which is what they pay for a good car, Q percent of the time, and $1,200, what they value a bad car at, a lemon, 1 minus Q percent of the time. Let's assume Q is 0.5. So exactly half the cars are peaches, exactly half are lemons. You're going to buy, you know, it's 50-50 chance which one you'll get. Well, then you'd be willing to pay 0.5 times 1,200, because you know half the time you'll get a clunker, and 0.5 times 2,400, because half the time you'll get a peach. You'd be willing to pay 1,800. You would not be willing to pay more than that. All right. That's if Q is 0.5. If you know, and we assume buyers do know the probabilities, they don't know which car is good and bad, but they know the percentage of total cars that are good and bad. Let's look at where it's not 50-50. Let's look at a market where the vast majority of cars are great. There are only a few lemons. Q is 0.9. So you as a buyer know if you buy a car, there's a 90% chance you'll end up with a peach, and only a 10% chance you'll end up with a lemon. Well, plug it in. What's the expected value of buying a used car? 0.9 times 2,400 plus 0.1 times 1,200. Not being able to tell the difference going in, you'd be willing to pay $2,280. Now, since in this case where buyers can't tell whether a car is a peach or a lemon, they pay the expected value, which is $2,280. $2,280, the expected value of the car to buyers, is more than sellers who own peaches demand. So if you know you own a lemon, you'd sell it for $1,000. You'll take $2,280. If you know you own a peach and you're selling it, well, you'd take $2,000. So again, you'd take $2,280. All sellers can negotiate a price that is better than the minimum they're willing to accept. People who own lemons are willing to sell them. People who own peaches are willing to sell them. So there are gains from trade for lemons and for peaches. All the cars get sold. Now I should point out that because buyers are going to pay this number for all cars, if buyers could tell the difference, then they would be willing to pay $2,400 for the good cars. That means that now they're only willing to pay $2,280 for any car, which means including for the good cars. So buyers will end up paying less for a peach, but more for a lemon, which means even though all the gains from trade will still happen, some of that benefit will go to the lemon owners, who will get paid more than they would have if buyers could tell the difference. And peach sellers will get paid a little bit less than they would have. But still, all the gains from trade happen. Now, let's look at a different value of Q, the one we looked at first, 0.5. Half the cars are peaches, half the cars are lemons. All buyers, because they can't tell the difference, will only pay the expected value, $1,800, which is here. 0.5 times their value of the most they'll pay for a bad car, plus 0.5 times the most they'll pay for a good car. So a car they can't tell if it's good or bad, the most they'll pay is $1,800. Let's see. Okay, so all buyers are going to say, we'll pay you $1,800, nothing more. Well, if you own a lemon and you know it's a lemon, you'll be happy to sell it at that price. So lemons will still be sold. If you own a lemon, you'll keep it on the market. But if you own a peach, you know it's a peach, you know it's a great car. You're not going to take less than $2,000 because you know it's a great car. You're only getting offered $1,800. You're not going to sell it. And you know that buyers are only offering $1,800, so you're going to pull that car off the market. You will exit the market. In this simple case where there are only two kinds of cars, there are no gray areas, it's not a continuous variable, all the peaches get pulled off the market, which means now all cars are lemons that are for sale. If a car is for sale, it's a lemon. As a buyer, you know this. The expected value of a used car is $1,200. So lemons will get sold here. All used cars are lemons. All sellers will accept $1,000. All buyers won't pay more than $1,200. The gains from trade for lemons will still happen. But peaches will be driven out of the market. They will not be sold. All the gains from trade of the good cars are now lost because those transactions don't happen. Okay, so we know that if 90% of the cars are peaches, all the trades can happen and all the gains from trade are realized by someone. If Q is 0.5, that can't happen. Peaches get pulled out of the market, all those gains from trade are lost. Well, that means that somewhere between 0.5 and 0.9, between 50% peaches and 90% peaches, somewhere in there is the threshold where all the peaches drop out of the market. Where is that? Well, the key is that the expected value, the amount that buyers are willing to pay for a car when they can't tell its quality, if that is less than the minimum that peach sellers are willing to take, they drop out of the market. If the expected value is $2,001, they'll stay in the market. Peaches are for sale. If it's $19.99, owners of peaches will not sell them and they go away. So this is the threshold number. So lemons, we could say, crowd out the peaches from the market. So all the gains from trade, in that case, for peaches are lost. So the mere fact that lemons exist and are being sold, and that buyers can't tell the difference, it imposes an externality on people who want to buy or sell peaches. Now, how can you calculate Q? We know it's between 0.5 and 0.9 in this example. So what fraction, how big can the fraction of cars that are lemons be before all the peaches drop out? Well, if the expected value, we know that threshold is 2,000. As long as it's $2,000, peach sellers will just barely stay in the market. Okay, so just plug in 2,000 for the expected value and solve for Q. 2/3. As long as 2/3, because Q is the percentage of good cars, of peaches, as long as there are at least 2/3 of the used cars are peaches, peach sellers will stay in the market. If the fraction of lemons crosses above 1/3, there will only be lemons traded. Now this, we call these two equilibria pooling or separating. A pooling equilibrium is when both kinds of cars can be traded, even when the buyers can't tell which is which, when this information asymmetry exists. But if only one kind of car can be traded, we call that a separating equilibrium. Now, let's look at one more example. So far, we looked at cars that only have two quality levels, peach, lemon. That's it. Now, let's assume that the quality of cars is a continuous variable, and it's uniformly distributed between 1,000 and 2,000. The seller knows where on this continuum their car falls. The buyer does not. So let's say a car is in the middle of the range, 1,500. Well, then the seller will sell that car for $1,500, nothing less. And a car, if everyone knew, if the buyers knew what kind it was, they say for a car worth that the seller thinks is worth 1,500, we'll pay 300 more, we'll pay 1,800. If this is the distribution of car values to the sellers and to the buyers, it's the same thing, shifted $300 up, which cars in this range will and will not be traded if buyers can't tell the difference? Well, the distribution is uniform between 1,000 and 2,000. So buyers will have an expected value of 1,500. Excuse me, sellers will have an expected value of 1,500. Now sellers know where they fall on the range. So they know if it's a $1,200 car or a $1,900 car. But the average, the expected value, 1,500. So buyers, not being able to tell, will pay $1,800 for any car, because 1,500 is the average time plus the 300. Now, if this is the case, if you're a seller and you have a car and you know it's at the top of that range, you know it's worth 1,900, you won't accept less than 1,900 because you know it's a great car. But you can only get 1,800 for it. So if your car in the range of 1,000 to 2,000, all the cars valued between 1,800 and 2,000 exit the market. Now, the market is now only cars with a value uniformly distributed between 1,000 and 1,800. Well, that means the expected value is not 1,500 anymore. It's the average of that. It's 1,400. And buyers tack on 300. They'll only pay 1,700 for any car because they can't tell the difference. Well, if buyers won't pay more than 1,700 for any car, then people who own cars, sellers who know they're worth more than 1,700, now won't sell. So now you already lost cars valued between 1,800 and 2,000. They're off the market. Now cars valued between 1,700 and 1,800 are pulled off the market. Wash, rinse, repeat. Eventually, this market collapses because the more high-value cars are pulled out of the market, as that continues to happen, the expected value to the sellers and the buyers continues to drop. The amount buyers are willing to pay goes down and down and down. As that happens, the higher quality cars, the threshold of the ones that can stay in the market goes down and down and down, which makes the average quality of the car go down and down and down. And it's a vicious circle, a vicious cycle. Now, that doesn't actually happen in the used car market, which was one of the reasons. This is a very interesting paper. It was originally submitted to, in economic circles, there's the big five, the 5 journals that are way better in impact than all others. American Economic Review, Quarterly Journal of Economics, Review of Economic Studies, Econometrica, and the Journal of Political Economy. I think I got those right. Generally, the top two, well, American Economic Review is considered the best. Although technically, if you crunch the numbers, Quarterly Journal of Economics nowadays probably edges them out slightly, but still. Okay, Akerlof submitted this paper to American Economic Review. They rejected it. He said, no, not good enough. Then he sent it to another of the top 5, Review of Economic Studies. They took a hard pass. The main complaint was, well, this can't be true because the used car market still exists. If this was true, the market would collapse, like this logic here says. I think another criticism was that, well, sure, it's true, but that result is trivial. Yeah. Rule of thumb, all of the greatest genius ideas, after the fact, you look back and go, well, sure, that was obvious. Anyway, he finally said it, third time, he sent it to the Quarterly Journal of Economics. They accepted it. This paper is one of the most highly cited and one of the most important papers of the economics papers of the 20th century. And those two journals, I'm sure, are still kicking themselves for passing on it. It's like the old story about Star Trek in the original series in the late 60s. Somewhere at NBC, there was some junior executive somewhere who said, nobody's going to watch that. Cancel it. And they did. I don't know if that person's still alive, but you know, they probably regret that decision since it's a multi-billion-dollar franchise now. All right. The unraveling of a market, this process, is called, at least in insurance, it's a general term, but it's usually applied to the insurance markets, called a death spiral. A death spiral can happen to markets other than insurance, other than health insurance. But for public policy reasons, health insurance is the most prominent case. In health insurance, there is a very strong information asymmetry. I know, mostly, if I'm going to be sick or not. I know my health status. The same way the seller of a car knows whether it's a peach or a lemon. Am I going to have really high or really low medical bills next year? I have some idea of that. Insurance companies don't necessarily have that information, so they have to charge. Well, if there's no information asymmetry, which in an unregulated market, in this case, there wouldn't be. This is actually not a case of information asymmetry, strictly speaking. It's of the inability to act on the information. In a pure free market for health insurance, which does not exist, the insurance company, health insurance company, could ask me all sorts of questions about my health, could force me to take all sorts of tests, could use all sorts of predictive algorithms, and they could get a pretty accurate idea of what my medical costs probably will be next year, based on my age, based on my gender, based on my blood pressure, my cholesterol, my medical history, all of that. They could figure out how risky I am to insure. And they could sell me a health insurance policy priced correctly for that level of coverage so that they could recoup on average their costs, which is, you know, basic theoretical sense what insurance is supposed to do. But, and in some insurance markets that still happens. That causes problems, though, from a public policy perspective. Older people tend to be sicker than younger people on average. They tend to have higher medical bills. Variety of things that can predict medical costs can be known, but that means people who are sick, older, sicker, if you have kidney failure, if you're diabetic, the insurance company, well, they'll know that, and they will charge you a much higher premium because the expected value of your medical expenses would be very high. If you're going to cost the insurance company $1 million a year, they can't insure you for $1,000 a year. But that means that people who are very sick would have to pay very, very high premiums. Some people can't afford it. And so government intervenes, public policy. In the 1990s, there were a number of policy experiments on the state level to try to fix this problem so that everyone could afford health insurance, the sick and the healthy. These reforms generally took one form of making it illegal for health insurance companies to charge people different rates based on their health status. They had to charge healthy, sick, old, young, the same. This is generally goes by the name community rating, meaning they have to provide a premium rate based on the average of the whole community. They can't charge different people different amounts. And a lot of technical variations, but basically that. Well, let's take a really simple example. Let's say everybody has health insurance, and the premium is $100 a month, some ridiculous number. Well, half the people are going to have costs higher than that, and half the people costs lower than that, because the insurance company, to stay in business, has to, on average, have their premiums cover their payments. Well, that means people who are sicker than average are getting a good deal because they know their medical costs will probably be a lot more than $100 a month. And they're getting it paid for by the insurance company for only $100. So people who are sicker than average want to buy that insurance. But if you are young, healthy, no medical conditions, then you kind of know your probable medical costs next month are going to be a lot less than $100. This $100 insurance is a bad deal for you. So you're probably not going to buy it next time. In just a very simplified example, that means everybody who is the healthier half of the population will exit the health insurance market. Now, you only have the sicker, more expensive half remaining. To cover those costs, the insurance company now has to charge, because they're required to charge, a rate for the average level of expense. They will have to charge the average of that sicker half. Well, now you have the same problem again. The lower cost, the healthier half of that sicker half, now is getting a bad deal. They exit the market. The result is, if you impose community rating, if you force insurance companies to charge everybody the same rate, and that's all you do. Younger, healthier people will end up subsidizing older, sicker people. Young, healthy people will pay more than they would in an individually rated policy. Older, sicker people pay less. But that means younger, healthier people are going to perceive that they are receiving a bad deal. They will exit the market. They will stop buying the insurance, which will cause the average cost to go up. The people who still have insurance will become sicker and sicker and sicker on average. And so the price of insurance for those who have it will go up and up and up. It's the death spiral in the market. Fewer and fewer people insured. The cost of insurance goes up and up and up. If that is combined with something called guaranteed issue, community rating means you have to charge the same price to everybody. Guaranteed issue means you have to sell the policy to anybody who asks. Frequently that was combined with community rating. And if you dump on top of that regulations that limit the amount that insurance, so you see the prices going up, and you put a cap on it, a price control, that means the companies can't stay in the business without going bankrupt. So they exit the insurance market. In the 90s, a lot of states tried roughly the same thing, what I just described. 93, New Jersey. In the plans that were regulated this way, between 96 and 2001, the number of people receiving insurance dropped by more than half, from 186,000 down to 85. The median age of the insured went up. Age is correlated with healthcare expenditure. And so fewer people were insured. They tended to be sicker. And the premiums went up a lot. And the faster the premiums went up, the faster healthier people stopped buying insurance. 1993, roughly the same pattern. When they enacted the law, there were 19 insurers in the state. 6 years later, there were 0. Kentucky. In 1994, the Kentucky state legislature said it's going to be illegal in Kentucky for a health insurance company to refuse to sell a policy to someone just because they're very sick. And they capped the premiums. Well, there were 40 health insurers in Kentucky. Short number of years later, there were only 2 remaining, and those 2 remaining had premiums that were so astronomically high for that segment of the market that people basically couldn't afford it. The market collapsed. New York, 1994. For the non-Medicare population, meaning younger than 65, in private health insurance, went from $750,000 down to 34,000. And the premiums went through the roof. Just insanely high premiums. In most of these states, actually the one that's not listed here is Tennessee. They had something called TennCare, T-E-N-N. And they triggered an insurance death spiral. Destroyed the insurance market, premiums skyrocketed. The number of insured fell like a rock. Eventually they had to repeal it. I mean, this gets into public choice theory, analyzing political situations, political systems with economic principles. If you, as a politician, say, I'm going to pass a law saying that insurance companies can't charge sick people more, that's probably going to get you elected. But it could be, sometimes bad economics is politically popular. In Tennessee, the problem got so bad that the lawmakers just repealed TennCare completely. They were forced to face reality. In New York and New Jersey, I'm not so sure about Washington and Kentucky. I know in New York and New Jersey, the laws were destroying the health insurance market in those states. They did not repeal the laws entirely. They just tinkered around the edges to try to reduce the problem. Various states have done this to varying degrees, which is why health insurance in the private market costs radically different amounts on different sides of the same state line, of a state line. In Ohio, the average is this. In New York, it's that. It's because of varying degrees of market unraveling that have been imposed as a matter of policy for political reasons that may be valid, but aren't economically efficient. Okay, now, that was adverse selection. Here's something different called moral hazard. Adverse selection is sometimes called hidden information, and moral hazard, hidden action. Moral hazard roughly means if you're deciding how much risk to take, and you know that if things turn out badly, you will pay all of the cost, you will choose the efficient level of risk to take. But if you know that should things turn out badly, someone else will be forced to pay part of the cost, that's going to make you take more risk than you would otherwise. It'll take you more than the efficient. You will take on more than the efficient level of risk. Think about it in a simple gambling example. You go to Las Vegas. You know the odds. You decide how much money you want to put on red on the roulette wheel. How much you want to bet. How much risk to take. If you win, you get all the profit. If you lose, you suffer all the loss. You'll optimize somewhere. But what if you knew for every dollar you bet, if it comes up black, because you're betting on red, comes up black, well, I'm sorry, other way around. You're betting on red. So you know if it comes up red, you get all the winnings. But if it comes up black, if you lose the bet, you only have to pay half of the loss. You make somebody else across the hall pay the other half. Don't you think that would increase the size of your bets? Because you knew you'd get all the benefit of winning, but only pay part of the cost of losing. You'll take on more risk. That's called moral hazard. Simple example. If you have car insurance, so if it's stolen, they buy you a new car. Are you more likely to leave your car unlocked than if you had the same car but no insurance? If it gets stolen, you're out of car. I think it's pretty obvious. If you don't have insurance to replace your car from theft, you are going to make sure you lock it. If you know, if it gets stolen, they'll give me a new one, you're going to be less likely to lock your car. Let's use an example of bicycle theft insurance. If an insurer is forced to sell insurance to everyone for their bicycle at the same price, that is a price that would be actuarially, it's hard to pronounce, actuarially fair, meaning the insurance company just breaks even. And people live in two kinds of neighborhoods. There are neighborhoods with a very high probability your bike will be stolen, and other neighborhoods with a very low probability. So the insurance company is forced to sell insurance to everybody at the rate that would be appropriate for a medium level of risk. People who live in high theft neighborhoods are going to get a great deal with that. They will buy the insurance. People in low theft neighborhoods where there's very little risk, they're not going to buy that insurance. It's a bad deal for them. That's adverse selection. The second group will exit the market, and the insurance market will enter a death spiral. Well, let's look at that's adverse selection. But what if the risk, if you didn't have these two different kinds of neighborhoods, let's say the risk of a bike getting stolen was the same for everyone in all neighborhoods? Would the market function? Maybe, maybe not. Okay, the risk is the same in all neighborhoods, but you have some input into whether your bike gets stolen or not. You can buy a really good bicycle lock. That'll lower the probability your bike is stolen, but they're expensive. If you park your bike, you just need to jump into the store for a second. You have a choice. Take the time and trouble to lock it up. For the 5 minutes you'll be gone, or say, well, I'm just gonna be gone for a minute. I'll be right back, and not lock it. So your actions influence whether your bike is stolen or not. Now, if you do not have insurance, then if your bike is stolen, you suffer the entire loss. So if it's stolen, you suffer the entire loss. To avoid that, you would have to pay all of the cost of an expensive bicycle lock, taking the trouble to lock it up. So you pay the cost of protecting your bike, all of it. But you get all of the benefit of your bike probably not being stolen. You pay all the cost, you get all the benefit, you will optimize at the efficient level of investment in bike safety, in bike protection. There are no externalities. No one else is paying for some of your bicycle lock. No one else is protecting your bike. So the efficient level of protection will be purchased by you for your bike. Now, on the other hand, let's say you have bike insurance. Well, that means, why should you spend a lot of money on an expensive bike lock? Why should you spend time locking up your bike if you're just gonna be gone for a minute? If you did that, you would be getting if you did that, you'd be paying all of the cost of protecting your bike, but you wouldn't be getting all the benefit because a good piece of that benefit is already paid for by the insurance company because you bought insurance. Imagine if it was 100% insurance. Your bike is stolen, we instantly give you an exactly identical bike. Well, that means that what's the benefit of spending money on a lock? Zero. You wouldn't buy a lock. That means there is an externality. And as with externalities, they cause inefficiently high or inefficiently low levels of production, in this case, of bike protection. Insurance for stolen bicycles is, in this sense, the same as pollution. You're a company. You're producing a product. You can spend a lot of money to clean up the mess that production makes, or you can dump it all in the river. make the people downstream pay to clean it up. Not buying a bicycle lock is like just dumping it in the river. You're imposing part of the cost of your choices on someone else. It's an externality, which in the case of pollution means inefficiently high levels of production. Okay. With insurance, there are these problems. How can insurers compensate for adverse selection, people who are less risky opting out of the market, or moral hazard, people who are in the market but taking more risk because they are insured? If the amount of care people put into protecting their bikes, for example, is observable, if the insurance company can see this, they know if you have a good lock or not. They know if you always lock your bike when you walk away. Well, then there's no information asymmetry. There's no problem here. If you always lock your bike, you can buy bike insurance at a very low rate. If you never lock your bike, you can buy bike insurance at a very high rate. There's no moral hazard. But if the amount of care you put into securing your bike is not observable to the insurance company, or as in the health insurance case, somebody passes a law saying, well, yeah, you know, but you're not allowed to act on it. You have to behave as if you don't know. Well, one thing an insurance company can do, they can put in a deductible. That is, if you file a claim for like $1,000, you, the insured person, you have to pay the first $200. Insurance doesn't kick in until after that. Well, that's going to make you somewhat more careful to lock your bike. You won't be as careful as if you suffered the entire loss, but still, it'll reduce the moral hazard. Next, insurance companies can try to force you to, as a condition of insurance, to not accept more risk because you're insured. They can require you to prove you have a good bike lock. They can require you to, whatever, videotape every time you leave your bike showing that you locked it up. In life insurance and medical insurance, they could charge more for heavy smokers, heavy drinkers, if they're allowed to. Car insurance, lower premiums for policies that have higher deductibles. Because of the higher deductible, less moral hazard. Or for drivers with histories of safe driving. Now, if an insurer knows the risk of insuring a particular individual, then there's no information asymmetry, there's no possibility of adverse selection, moral hazard. They can write a contract. The person and the insurance company can come to an agreement that will be tailored to that individual and to that individual's risk level. And both sides can get gains from trade. But if all people look alike to the insurer, if they can't tell who's high risk, who's low risk, or they're not allowed to act on it, then they have to offer the insurance policy at the average price, just like the market for lemons. Buyers can't tell if it's a good car or bad car, so they'll only offer the value to them of the average car. If this happens, then high-risk types and low-risk types are pulled together, charged the average of the group. If everyone stays in the market, this means that people who are low risk are going to end up subsidizing insurance for high-risk people. Young, healthy people who know they'll never have a medical bill for the next 10 years will have to pay the premium level of an average average health person, which will be way too high for them. So I'm a low-risk person. I don't want to pay the average. I want to get insurance based on my low risk. How can I do that? The insurance company can't tell whether I'm high risk or low risk. I can do it by correcting the information asymmetry, by giving the insurance company information so that they can tell that I'm a low risk person. Then they can give me the insurance. They can sell it to me at the low risk rate, not at the average rate. It's like proving somehow that your car is a peach. Then you can sell it at the peach price. So how would a buyer, well in this case sellers, signal? It's called signaling. Signal that their car is a peach. How can they send that information to the potential buyer credibly? Well, just saying, oh, my car's a peach, that won't cut it for obvious reasons. You need some believable, credible signal. Well, if you are offering a professional service, you're a lawyer, you're an accountant, you're an economist, you can show your professional credentials, like mine. Oh, what the heck. Oh. Hi, you should buy economics education from me because I have this fancy diploma. It's late in the day, I'm tired. We'll play along. You're a plumber. You can give references from previous clients. Oh yeah, this guy, oh boy, did such a great job. In the case of cars, used cars, you can offer a warranty. You can say, you should buy this used car from me, from my company, because if it breaks down in the first 90 days, you bring it back, we'll fix it for free. Why would that offer make people believe that your car is a peach? How does that send that signal? It's because the offer of this warranty, it's not the warranty itself that gives that information. It's the fact that offering it would have a different cost to sellers of peaches and sellers of lemons. If I know as a seller that my car's a peach, I can offer that warranty. It'll cost me essentially nothing because I know this car is not going to break down. It's very low cost, almost free for me to offer that warranty. But if I know I have a lemon, offering that warranty would be terribly expensive because I know it's going to break down. So if someone offers the warranty, it's not the protection that allows the sale to happen. It's the fact that the offer has a differential cost on the sellers. So that as a buyer, you know, owners of peaches will offer a warranty. Owners of lemons won't offer a warranty. Therefore, offering the warranty is a credible signal to buyers whether your car is a peach or a lemon. You offer a warranty, I know it's a lemon, I know it's a peach, I know it's a good car, which allows the information asymmetry to go away. Cars that have warranties, everybody knows they're peaches, and they can be sold at the peach price with gains from trade. Cars that do not offer a warranty, everybody knows they're lemons and can be sold at the lemon price with those gains from trade. Signaling, it eliminates the information asymmetry, if it's done perfectly, and allows the market to function. Signaling theory is commonly applied to the labor market. In particular with regards to education, which is relevant to you right now, because this is what you're doing. Assume a labor market has two kinds of workers, kind of like cars, lemons and peaches. high productivity workers and low productivity workers, nothing in between. Now, remember that in a perfect market, the wage will be equal to the marginal product of the worker. If I can generate $27.9 for you an hour, you will pay me $27.9 per hour. It's the equilibrium. Now, assume a high ability worker, their marginal product is A sub H for high. A low ability worker, A sub L. And obviously A sub H is greater than A sub L. Now, assume that H% of workers are high ability, and thus 1 minus H are low ability. If employers know what kind of worker you are, then they will pay high marginal product workers a wage that's high, equal to their marginal product, and low marginal product workers, low productivity workers, a wage equal to their marginal product, a lower wage, two different wages. Market will function. But if firms can't tell when they're interviewing someone, is this a high quality worker or a low quality worker? They have to pay the average, the expected value of the production. The pooling wage, which would W sub P, which would be H, the percentage of workers who are high quality, times their marginal product, plus 1 minus H, the percentage of workers who are low productivity, times their low productivity. It's the average productivity in a sense. Now, since this pooling wage, the pooling equilibrium, which is, if H was 0.5, it would just be the average productivity of the two workers. That wage is going to be lower than the marginal product of the high productivity workers. The high productivity workers are going to get underpaid. They're going to be paid less than they're worth. Low productivity workers will be overpaid. They're going to be paid more than their worth. So, low productivity workers, they're happy with this. High productivity workers, not so happy. So if you're a high productivity worker, you have an incentive. You can profit by finding some way to credibly signal the employer that you are a high productivity worker. What signal could you send? With the cars, the warranty does the trick. In the labor market, education. Now, let's make a couple, how does education send this signal, allowing you to get the high productivity wage? First, we're going to assume that education does not change whether you're a high productivity or low productivity worker. Assume the marginal product of your labor does not change at all depending on how much education you get. Just assume that for the moment. But it does impose a cost on you, the worker, to get education. You have to pay tuition, like you're doing right now. Now let's assume that the cost of education, of a year of education, is different for high quality workers and for low quality workers. If you're a really smart person, you're going to be a high quality worker, maybe college is easier for you. Whatever. Different cost. Just like in the example of the warranty, owners of peaches, well, offering the warranty for them, it's cheap. But if you own a lemon, offering a warranty is expensive. It's that difference in cost that makes the signal work. So if the cost of a unit of education to a high quality worker is less than the cost of a unit of education to a low quality worker, then this signal can be credible. High quality workers will acquire a particular quantity of education if this quantity, they will acquire it if the difference in the wage they can get, which is the difference in their marginal product, it's the amount they could profit by having this signal sent. If that is greater than the total cost of getting that much education, then they'll do it. E sub h units of education times the cost for a high productivity worker per unit. It's like you buy 10 of something that costs $2 each. This is the total cost, the total you're spending on education. I got E years of education, it cost me C per year. If that is less than the wage increase you can get by sending the signal, you'll do it. So that must be true for this signal to work. It must also be true that the same amount of education is not profitable for low productivity workers to get, because their cost per unit, CL, is higher than CH. So this, number one, says that getting this much education is profitable for high quality workers, but unprofitable for low quality workers. Only if both of those are true will getting this much education be a credible signal. High quality workers will get the education, low quality workers will not. Since acquiring this quantity of education is a credible signal, just like with a warranty on cars, it allows high quality workers to provide the information that separates them in the eyes of the employers from low quality workers. This raises public policy questions and also economic questions. In the United States, in all decent countries, that's a normative thing, but I said it anyway, education is subsidized to some degree. In the US, primary education is free. But if it's subsidized, so high quality workers, low quality workers, the cost differential to them is smaller, then, well, you subsidize something, people consume more of it. If education does improve your efficiency as a worker, well, then more people will become, subsidizing it will cause more people to become educated, and more people will become higher quality workers. But if the value of education is not that it makes people more efficient, but it's purely signaling, then subsidizing it reduces its signaling value because it reduces the cost differential between the high quality and low quality workers. Which raises a fascinating economic question. If education, let's take the one extreme, has no signaling value and its value is entirely in how much more productive it makes people, then subsidizing education, in the extreme case, making all education free, would be efficient. It would increase the, well, not if you could consume an infinite amount, but it would make all workers who get education, all workers who become more efficient. That's good. But what if education really didn't make people more productive? Let's assume it's all signaling value. Then subsidizing it increases the dead weight loss of the signaling. Because if all you're doing is signaling, if it's not actually making anyone smarter or more efficient, then every dollar spent on education is just trying to provide information to prove you're not one of the lower productivity workers. It benefits you, but it doesn't increase the output of the society at all. This is called the sheepskin effect. It's been studied many times by economists. One way it's been to try to find out how much of education is signaling and how much is actually efficiency improving. One way they did this was to look at people who got a certain amount of education just shy of when you get the certificate, the thing that proves, your diploma, whatever. And look at people who just got a tiny bit more education and crossed that threshold. So they did get the certificate. Well, since those people have almost exactly the same amount of education, if it's all efficiency enhancing, then they should end up making about the same amount of money because they're equally productive. But if it's signaling value, then they're essentially equally productive, but one group would send a powerful signal and the other group would not. And there should be a massive difference in pay. Turns out, it looks kind of like it's the latter, at least not entirely, but look at me as an example. I defended my dissertation. They gave me this wonderful diploma. And so I was able to get this job. Good job. But what would have happened if I'd had 30 seconds less education? It wouldn't change how productive I am, but I just didn't fill out the last little form to get my PhD. I would be no different in terms of how productive I am. I'd know basically all that I know now. But I wouldn't have the sheepskin, so-called. I wouldn't get this job. No PhD, no professor. So, to some degree, we know education is efficiency enhancing. To some degree, it's wasteful signaling. A lot more work to do on that topic to find out how much of which and how we can make it better. I know this one was a bit long, but I hope you enjoyed it. See you next time.